Everybody, should we start again? So in this section, it's a short section to end the day. We've got the last of the Archers assemblies. We've got then 2 papers, and then we're going to go into sort of become our ritual of a collective Dum Tee Dum recording. We have our awards ceremony as well, so there's some prizes to give out. And if we can do the big shout out for the gym storyline to send on to feedback, and then we close for the day. At the end of the day, I'm going to put up the directions and the picture and everything for where we're going to go this evening for those that have dinner and those that just want to come somewhere for a drink. And if I can ask all of our volunteers, to remind you of those that are wearing these beautiful rosettes, to help get people to the main road so they can then walk up the hill if you were wanting to walk. If not, there'll be taxis or the car parks behind us as well for those. So anyway, we'll get to that in a bit. The last of the Archers Assembly, this is the 2 clan, this is the big Grundy clan we're talking about now. I said earlier that it was Susan and Neil got the least comments. It wasn't actually, it was Eddie and Clary. And everybody, it just really sort of unanimous, the least controversial of the lot, basically. 2 quite strong themes coming out for them. Overwhelmingly, the top comment for Clary was that she's the centre of the family and has pulled it together through many a hurdle that has been thrown at her, at them. For the younger generations of the Grundys, seem to be a generation that is loved, basically, quite honestly, loved and loved by their parents. Clary, though, was viewed as a little bit indulgent. Putting I call him Will I Am, because it's all about his ego. Putting him up there on a pedestal. But in the main, hold on, has it gone to the wrong ones? Eddie and Clary, big family, there we go. Oh yeah, the brother's boring. Will I Am on the pedestal there. But in the main, Clary and Eddie were seen to have come pretty good in everybody's eyes, from perhaps a shaky start, as some said, and Eddie's wavering moral compass, as a lot of people put it. Clary's domestic and emotional servitude was mentioned. It was generally agreed that the 2 have actually sort of come through quite a lot and come good. The house was seen as always being open. They had unconditionally supported their children. Eddie was seen to have come to a emotional maturity, and there's a lot of love in that family, and that was really recognised there. Do we agree with that? I personally don't think enough was made of Eddie's wavering moral compass and the effects that might have had. What do you think? Yes or no for those 2?
So Lucy V. Freeman did a thing on Dum Tee Dum a while ago where she said that she thought William is Clary's kind of twisted soul. So every time she says, "Oh, Eddie," something goes deep into William's heart, and that's a very Lucy V. Freeman point. But I think it wasn't bad.
Yeah, ignore that.
So I think there is something going on there, but I don't know. It's more about how they are together, isn't it?
I find it incredibly frustrating that Clary, when Will I Am was acting so obnoxiously, that she just colludes with that behaviour and never calls him out on it. And there's that perpetual cycle going through again. And Mia baking the cakes. And there was blue for the boys and pink for the girls, and all of that I find really, really problematic. Talking of problematic, the next one is Helen Archer. Now, with Pip and Helen, through all of the comments, when it came up to their particular family, Helen hugely was seen as benefiting from a family to co-parent and have on tap, basically, as babysitters. She's raised, well, she's come through a bit of her own troubles herself there, but she's raised King Henry. And, I mean, she's essentially viewed as self-centred. Some saw her as being as a protective parent, others as overprotective, over-anxious and controlling. We've asked, some people say, is Helen actually a neglectful parent by not getting Henry into counselling? And that's come up today, but that did come up as a comment in the Facebook feed when we were asking that. And also put herself into counselling as well. Is that her responsibility to herself to put her into counselling? But for some, that wasn't thought of as an issue, saying that her love, in the end, will win out. Helen, though, was also thought of as a bully, of Tom into taking the blame for running over Mike. And she's also described as too brittle, not very bright, and better at cheeses than at being a parent. So there is King Henry. So somewhat one-sided point of view on Helen here, perhaps. But I think also this is quite a complex character as well. We've discussed earlier that there are faults with her parents, and maybe they hadn't done enough to equip her emotionally growing up. And she's been through it in the last couple of years. It was lovely to hear her laugh, wasn't it, the other day, when Lee made her laugh about something. And I hadn't heard that in years and years and years. But of course there's Henry and then Gideon, and what have we got coming with us there? And that seems to be a concern for a lot of people. Now the last ones were put in by popular request when I first put the matriarchs out on Facebook. So the first, this is what I'm going to be doing at the conference, answer this question. And a lot of people said, are you going to be doing Ed, Emma, Ed and Will? So I thought, okay, popular request, we'll put that in. And actually, it was very, very few people came back to apply for that one. So whether it was, I was wondering, do people perceive this trio of parenting as more contentious than they actually are, maybe? So it's people's general agreement was after the confusion of who should be married to who in this generation of Grundys, things did sort of sort themselves out for a while, and in its own way, everybody seems to be quite happy. The brothers that were at war for a great many of their children's formative years, respondents did worry about, well, what pattern has this set for them? What have the children seen here? What have they learned here? What will the effect be on the next generation? But even if a peace has been reached now, how long will that actually last? The peace doesn't just pertain to the brothers either, but post Nick and Joe, the family was seen as being in a state of harmony. Many thought how Emma has stepped into a parenting role with Mia, with some of the most touching scenes they'd heard over the last year. A comment was made about the heteronormativity of the role models in this family. They're very female, they're very male, stereotypical, they're very mothers, the men are outside of the home sort of thing. And I got mentioned on Facebook thread at the time, sort of thinking back, yes, the comment when Mia was making those cupcakes with Clary brought a lot of people to a real red mist, as I saw when I went back onto the other Facebook posts on that. So I wonder if people, here we've got so family peace is reached. Emma steps into a maternal role with Mia, but that's because William really just didn't step into any parenting role for that child at all. A positive example of a blended family. They're hard-working, the children aren't spoilt, but against them, destructive formative years for the fourth generation, and then these very stereotypical role models. But again, of a family that people really seemed keen to talk about, actually very little was said about them. So do we actually just quite like them? And they're getting on, and they're a very good example of a blended family. What do you think? Has William redeemed himself? Should Emma be stepping into that role as a parent to me, or would that just happen anyway? What do you think?
Will is a twat.
Will is a twat. Do we think that there's any hope for Will to not be a twat?
the mechanisms aren't in place in his own family, and as we looked at earlier, he wasn't able to access counselling, which would probably be transformative for him, and I don't think without external help outside the family he's going to change.
Go.
Michael's earning his rosette.
If Will wasn't such a twat, don't you think that people would have more sympathy for what he's been through, more understanding that he couldn't cope in those circumstances?
No, you're absolutely right. It's really hard to have sympathy with him, even though you know he's been through something really traumatic. He isn't likeable, so you have very little patience with him for all of that, and you don't want to indulge him like Clary does. I have quite a lot of anger towards Clary, actually. I do think she colludes with him and continues his behaviour, and he should be called out on it.
I think perhaps the reason he had so few responses is that we're all so desperate for the Grundys to be happy to catch a break that we just don't want to criticise.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think it was in the Grundys and then the Carters that the word love was mentioned the most. So I think, we could see in that there's some loving relationships there and quite sound, healthy family ties there. That, again, there are not so many comments for that reason, so I was quite in agreement with that. But yeah, this family really does need a break, and it is lovely to see them all kind of beginning to come through some really, two very big deaths within their family. We'll leave it there because we've got to get on. Sorry. Oh, go on. Okay, you've got the mic.
Okay, I was just going to say that I think actually Emma and Ed and Will, to a lesser extent, are actually very good parents under whatever circumstances. And they are very much good enough parents as a three. I think it's entirely appropriate that Emma steps into that role with Mia, because you're looking at a young man who, I don't particularly like him, but there's lots of reasons why he is the way he is, who wasn't in a position to really look after anybody. Quite right that his family did that. It didn't have to be his mum and dad. It was his sister-in-law, ex-wife.
Yeah.
But it was right.
And it takes a village, doesn't it, etc., etc. We could go on. The last section is our intertextual lucky dip, our potpourri of various. There's no sort of particular theme in this. We'll find our theme as we go along, I guess. We've got, first of all, sorry, I should have said there's a video first. Sorry. Abby Pattenden isn't with us this year. Do you remember Abby? Lots of vlogs. She's not been able to join us this year, but she's done a video about Joe's funeral, which is lovely. I just need to go down there to play it. Bear with me a moment.
Hello, academic archers one and all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Abby Pattenden, a funeral director, current immediate past president of the National Association of Funeral Directors, and long-time academic archerer. I'm sorry I haven't been able to join you for this year's conference. I hope all of you are knitting and crocheting, eating cake, and of course analysing the archers with wild enthusiasm. Can't wait to catch up with all of you next time. Joe died in a time frame that meant that I couldn't submit a paper, so I'm grateful to be allowed to slip in with a quick pitch to make a few brief points. The first half is about Joe's death and funeral, and the second half is about some of the fan responses to it, which ties in with the other strand of this year's conference. In terms purely of Joe's funeral, there's very little to talk about. We didn't hear any of the service itself. We didn't also hear much of the planning or about the decisions that were made. We do know that he was taken to his service at St Stephen's by pony and trap, and there was quite a lot of discussion online about whether a coffin would actually fit on a trap. I'm not sure myself, but some people seem to think not. We know that Joe wore his best suit after Clary had it dry cleaned, in spite of Alf objecting about that. The listener not being present at the funeral reflects a growing trend in the UK away from formal funeral services. Direct cremations account for only 2% of the UK market, and this is compared to 38% in the USA, but this is increasing all the time. Simplicity Cremations, a specialist UK provider, saw a 230% increase in demand in 2017 to 2018 alone. In the episode containing Joe's funeral, we instead mostly heard his funeral reception. My experience shows that these are becoming more important. For example, people will choose the time of the funeral, taking into account what they want to happen afterwards. This meant there was a focus on Joe's character and his quirks, such as the use of everyone having full names. I like to think that this was a reflection of what I see in our business, the increased privileging of the less formal part of the overall funeral, and the day did acknowledge that in Joe's farewell. The short clip of Edward Kelsey at the end of the episode may also have been a nod to the fact that more people are planning their funerals in advance and so can be part of the funeral, or people are creating bespoke funerals where this happens. I've arranged several funerals where the deceased person's voice has been included, either through a message specially recorded before they died or by playing a recording of a performance they had participated in. I could echo my previous paper on Nick's funeral to talk about some of the wasted opportunities that I perceived in the way the storyline developed. I'd have liked to have heard about the cost of a funeral or the support or lack thereof available to the Grundys to meet these costs. There was one line where Clary said funerals are expensive, but otherwise there was no mention. I'd have liked some exploration of some of the choices that they made to make the funeral feel more personal. Alf and Eddie's wild goose chase for the hangover cure felt like a Grundy caper of old, but I'd have loved there to be more exploration of the effect on losing the linchpin of the family. For example, how would the death of Jo affect Poppy so soon after the death of her mum? The one scene where Eddie was emotional was poignant, and I'd have liked more of that, although I suppose the contrast that it had to other scenes made it seem more effective. The other aspect that I want to mention is about the way that listeners responded to the death of Edward Kelsey on the 23rd of April and then to Jo in October. Edward Kelsey's death was widely covered in Archer fan communities online and in the wider media. He was described in The Guardian as having a rumbling burr which captured the spirit of the Archers, and his obituary in The Stage described his voice as one of the most familiar and best loved on radio. Listeners were effusive in their praise of Edward and recollections of Jo. The adage about not speaking ill of the dead seems to extend to characters in The Archers. There were some dissenting voices amongst this. I remember one comment on the Archers Appreciation Facebook page saying that Edward Kelsey's death didn't change the fact that Jo was a miserable, smelly old criminal. This wasn't well received, and people seem to want to remember Jo positively, perhaps out of some desire to respect or conflate him with Edward Kelsey. It's the period between Kelsey's death and Jo's which was really interesting to me. People started getting cross that Jo hadn't died yet. There were negative comments online about the length of time the funeral was taking to take place. It's not unusual for characters in The Archers to not be heard for weeks or even months at a time, but this seems to matter for some characters more than others. Listeners readily accept the existence of silent characters as a positive quirk of the programme. However, characters becoming silent, whether temporarily, permanently or not known, especially while they stay in Ambridge, seems to be a different matter. This is why I wonder if there wasn't the same response in between the death of Sarah Kaywood and Caroline. Caroline wasn't in Ambridge anymore. It's almost as if characters are not allowed to become silent. Usha and Dr. Locker mentioned fairly frequently, especially in a legal or medical storyline, as is Carol, but it's Kathy who's referred to most. I saw a post about her yesterday as I wrote this in late January, although she hasn't been heard since 2015, and only twice in that year according to Dum Tee Dum statistics. Strangely, her son Jamie doesn't seem to attract the same commentary, perhaps because he was less established in the drama. People seem to find it hard to accept that a character who they've listened to for such a long time can be carrying on their lives within the community without being heard, although Kathy is mentioned every so often, and so was Jo after Edward Kelsey had died. In The Spectator, Kate Chisholm described the wait between Kelsey's death and Jo's as creepy and ignominious. I even saw suggestions online that the lengthy wait was disrespectful to Kelsey, although when I asked about a preferable alternative and said that I thought it was good that planning was obviously going into how Jo would die, people didn't really provide me with any sort of alternative. On this note, there was one further interesting point. A few people questioned whether Jo might be replaced by another actor, so whether someone else would come in and do Kelsey's job. And this was treated as almost sacrilege, even though the Archers does do this quite frequently. And interestingly, Kelsey himself had replaced the previous actor, Hayden Jones, when he died in the 1980s. Who knows why this is? There might be a paper in it for someone. Thank you all very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and I very much hope to see you all next year. Bye.
So knowing Abby and her work on funerals for us before, I did find myself thinking with that dreadful Aldridge naming ceremony in the week, this old crap, and we never heard Jo's funeral. Our next paper I'm very excited about because we've been waiting for it for several years. We accepted Hamish's paper 2 or 3 years ago, and circumstances meant that he hasn't been able to deliver it, but I've been excited since then.
Thank you very much, thank you very much. It's been a great day, hasn't it? A very enjoyable day. I'm grateful to the organisers of the conference for organising it and letting us come. In the interest of precision and carefulness, I thought, and saving time, I thought I would actually do the lecture back to front. So, any questions? No. Well, it's that time of year again. No, not the pantomime season, but the academic Archers conference time. This is when the creatives, they're the people who who are allowed to come in late because they have been struggling with an idea, and they have gone. Sorry, let me read that again. This is when the creatives, they're the people who wear obvious piercings, and are allowed to come to meetings late because they've been struggling with an idea, gather together to consider the future of the Anthropocene through the episodic lens provided by a fictional Midlands farming community. This paper proposes that the annual Ambridge Pantomime should be seen not just as a comic interlude, but as a significant cultural activity in Ambridge's rural placemaking. In the run-up to the pantomime season, I find it an annual pleasure. Do you like this one too? When the cast of the Archers protest, "I'm not an actor," when they're asked to go into the pantomime. It marks the start of the panto season proper for me. Making and staging amateur performance is a key way in which geographical communities represent and celebrate their communal life in the places they live. Professional theatre is often used to promote tourism, for the economic regeneration of urban areas, and for example, as well as contributing to the national cultural conversation. One of the key qualities of amateur theatre, however, is that it exists largely outside these imperatives and serves a local and specific public. Amateur dramatics, or AmDram, has a bad name in this country sometimes, and it's all too easily mocked as a preserve of overbearing show-offs. Yet few of the 25 people I met in carrying out the research for this paper conform to that image. There was Jeff, who was an air traffic controller, Fiona, the midwife, Gethin, the retired policeman, and I met teachers, architects, accountants, engineers, taxi drivers, and mothers of young children who were very often glad to get out of the house for a while in the evening. I'm sorry, I have these paper. I suffer from Parkinson's disease, isn't it? It's okay. I'll get there. I have a copy of a BBC script of the pantomime rehearsal involving Kirsty and Tom in the run-up to their ill-fated wedding earlier. The one before Kirsty's current prenuptial brouhaha. The irony here being, of course, that we already know that Tom is having a profound second thoughts about his relationship with Kirsty in real life. He's about to do a bunk. The script runs internal Village Hall, 2 p.m, off, Kirsty on stage auditioning with a script. On, Linda and Tom are sitting in the auditorium. Off, Robert is behind Linda and Tom. Robert is visually inspecting the spotlights on a baton. Kirsty says this little speech. For off the sheriff comes this way, I'll draw my sword and make him stay. He won't fear ambush from a maid. who waits alone in leafy glade. Nice. And Linda said, that's it, Kirsty, and then Maid Marian withdraws into the woodland shadows. Thank you very much. Linda says, you don't want to read on, Tom? No thanks. Still can't be persuaded. Sorry, he's only here for moral support, says Kirsty. Moral support. Linda says, unless Tom's changed his... No, he hasn't. There's a lovely dialogue you could try, says Linda, and she puts down the script. But they don't take up these things at all. And so atavistic is the need to celebrate the deep veins of mystic experience or whatever is going on beneath Ambridge in the wintertime that recently, when there was no pantomime at all, Lower Loxley stepped in, you remember this, with an Xmas extravaganza involving a fairy grotto and simple peasants weaving kissing boughs. And any appeal to the historic culture of Ambridge that involves alcohol, and most of them do so, is usually associated with the Grundy family. The fact that one of the simple peasants, Joe Grundy, played for, as has been adverted to, over 38 years by the late Edward Kelsey, was planning to sell illicit hooch on the side, was the most promising sign of a caper to come. So even when there is no pantomime, there is a substitute, provided in this case by the rude mechanicals of Ambridge. You may also remember Laplandia. Remember Laplandia? Christmas extravaganza on Grundy's Field with Fat Paul as Santa. It was closed down by Dorsetshire police. Apparently, the elves, Baggy and Snatchy, were caught snatching bags. So the Grundys celebrated, as usual, with their traditional turkey slaughter. It says, Grandad likes us all to be there when they're killed and plucked. It's a family thing. Over 10 million people in the UK regularly and actively participate in amateur artistic creation across a wide range of art forms and activities. These are DCMS recent figures. The value of amateur theatre has to be measured by a different yardstick, though, from the one we use to measure the value of professional theatre. The value it has for its members, for the community within which it works and which it binds, the connections it forges and the enjoyment it brings to the audiences. All of this goes largely under the radar. It's important to recognise these benefits and the value of the work purely for its own sake. Surprisingly for some, amateur theatre is actually vastly popular in Britain. According to the NODA, which is the National Operatic and Dramatic Association, which represents 2,300 British amateur theatre societies, 437,800 people are actively involved in Great Britain at the moment. Their productions attract a total audience of more than 7.5 million. And last year, the combined box office turnover was 34 million, 2.3 million of which was donated to charity. Amateur theatre is the only live theatre available in much of this country. The group in Shetland gets audiences from up to a quarter of its local population. No professional theatre can match it. Amateur companies perform in professional theatres using scripts they've bought the rights to use. But the amateur royalty rate is 12.5 to 15% of box office receipts, which nets rights holders £4 to £5 million a year. But they hire in sets, costumes and lights, and in some cases engage professional directors and musicians, all of which have to be paid for. So their financial contribution to the theatre industry is substantial. Yet theatre is the only art form in England not to receive funding for some reason from the Arts Council. The Arts Councils of Wales and Scotland are more generous. Amateur societies benefit from public subsidy only insofar as they are sometimes allowed to perform in publicly funded venues. But perhaps most importantly, amateur theatre feeds the professional industry. 29% of our society's members are under 21, says the director of NODA. Many of them are typically stage-struck youngsters who want to go on from school and into the profession. In many cases, amateur groups provide the young people with their first taste of theatre, which is important in creating audiences as it is important in creating audiences as it is in creating artists. The use of the multiple play structure which you get in the Archers, embedded in the Archers, situates the writers, producers and performers of the Archers in relationship to the creative process itself, and their own work as radio drama professionals. For example, opportunities are shaped for the professionals to explore a view of the amateur often just for comic effect. This is evidenced by the presentation of some amateurs, such as Linda Snell, as either histrionic and vain lovies who are locked into meaningless power struggles, or poor but honest cider-swilling rustics like the Grundys, whose broad portraits or actions become a self-referential performance in themselves. Amateur theatre is a space where communities reflect themselves back to local audiences, many of whom know the people on the stage personally and are therefore more invested in the success of the performance. Throughout the fraught process of casting and rehearsal, ending in the performance of the annual Archers Pantomime and other theatrical events, which have been very, very interesting recently, very, very interesting, sort of diverse range of dramatic events been going on in Ambridge. Present a safe space and described in which the usually disguised local substrate of the village, the usually disguised social substrate of the village can be exposed without penalty. Importantly then, participating in amateur theatre is not about watching pre-packaged commercial entertainment. Amateur theatre creates a space where communities represent themselves back to themselves by taking charge of their selective symbolic life. The communal act of making theatre involves participants in passionate engagement in a public sphere, where they're engaged with the community. So let's celebrate the amateur, the play within the play, and the play that is within the play that is the Archers. Thank you.
Wasn't that wonderful? So, last paper of the day, headliner. We have, I can't remember the title. Yes. The overview of management styles in the Archers, with a discussion of Douglas McGregor's management theory X and theory Y to Ambridge workforces. Is Lucinda with us?
I don't know, I've not seen Lucinda's yet.
No? Oh, well. Calling once, calling twice. Sold. Right. Presents. Prizes.
No, first up, Dum Tee Dum.
Dum Tee Dum, yes. So Mia, will you do it on stage? That's the best way, isn't it? Or do you want to do it on?
I'll record it.
You'll record it and then send. Okay.
We're going to do this Dum Tee Dum. I'm going to count to 4 and then we'll do it together. Don't forget that then a big round of applause to cheer, okay? Right? Send this in to Lloyd for Dum Tee Dum. Let's have a bit. 1, 2, 3.
Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum, Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum, Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum, Dum Tee Diddly Dum, Dum Tee Diddly Dum Tee Diddly Dum Tee Diddly Dum, Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum Tee Dum, Dum Tee Diddly Dum.
So genuine question then. Are you just going to record it as a note? So in terms of Jim's story as a historic child sexual abuse survivor, the question is, do you feel that it was sensitively handled in the programme? And the answers are yep and no. So I'll ask the question. If you think it was, if you could shout. Yeah. And then if you think it wasn't, no. So, academic Archers, do you think that Jim Lloyd's storyline as a survivor of historic child sex abuse was sensitively handled by the Archers?
Yes!
Does anybody feel that it wasn't? Huh? 1. Thank you. Has anyone got a mic in the mouth? Have you got your mic?
I just wanted to ask, can we ask some random questions? Can we ask some random questions?
Can we ask some random questions?
Yes, well, I mean, we used the paper, so randomness.
Yeah.
Randomness, bring it, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, this is a result of the conversation in the bar yesterday.
Ooh.
Which, honestly, what starts in the bar should end in the bar. But I reckon that we all have things that are absolutely driving us crazy, and I'm not just counting Stefan and Charlie and whatever. My thing that's driving me crazy is Ed and Emma had a deposit. Where the hell is it? No one's mentioned it.
No.
There's a great chunk of money sitting in the bank account.
That could lay the foundations for Emma's house in her dad's back garden.
So, this drove me crazy at the time because the difficult part as a first-time buyer of limited means was getting the mortgage agreed. And the reason that they fell out so badly was that he felt it would have been dishonest to not have told them about his changed circumstances, right? But that is a bit of a tenuous route to lying. It's not like they filled in a false declaration on the mortgage. They did give the true situation at the time. So I think they could have still got that house. Because, once you've got the mortgage agreed in principle, that's not the same thing. That's not the problem.
Where there is money and it hasn't been mentioned. That's my question.
Okay, so I'd even have them in the house, even with what happened. But yes,
Go back.
My learned friend here thinks
Yes.
it probably was retained by the builder because it was a deposit.
Yeah, it's true. Yes, it's going to be returned.
That's Justin's business tactics, isn't it?
So what Alison Jenner's saying is that it wasn't returnable because it's a deposit.
No, well, that's a former financial advisor. You can all start hissing now. The deposit is only non-returnable if contracts have been exchanged. Prior to contracts being exchanged, any deposit, it would have been held by the solicitor and would have been returned.
Over here, guys.
Different random question. Has anyone else ever noticed the Ambridge rule that you're, apart from Helen, who's possibly the most obnoxious character, you're only allowed one friend per person? So if Usha comes into it, it's only to be Ruth's friend. Pat now has none, as Kathy doesn't speak. Anyone else notice that?
Jim's got... Please.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say Usha is actually also Elizabeth's very good friend. So Usha's got more than one friend. Ruth might not have, but Usha has.
She's conducting that friendship very silently.
This is kind of not about the Archers, but it's one of the reasons why I may start to hate the Archers, because I listen online, and I've already discussed this.
Yes.
I cannot stand the BBC Sounds music radio podcast, and could we please start a revolution and ask the BBC to stop it, because we know what we're listening to. Thank you.
I think we can probably pass that on. Yes?
Yeah, you do that side this side.
Okay, I did the most boring job in the world, according to somebody, for about 35 years. About 35 years. And the conveyancing in Ambridge is absolute rubbish, which has been mentioned earlier. But there is something which I mentioned myself, and nobody kind of went over it. Oliver Sterling has enriched the Grundys, and Emma and Ed will end up in Grange Farm, and they will be the kings and queens of Ambridge.
And there we are. I will redo my network diagrams accordingly.
Yeah, go on.
So on the subject of networking that Nicola did, I was in shock this week when Tracy Horriban flagged down Helen. First of all, you should never ask Helen for relationship advice, but the only way I see a connection between Helen and Tracy is via the Emma relationship. And Helen always treated Emma as sort of, you know, a tissue. You know, when she wants her, she's there. When
Yeah, and a lackey.
did anyone feel that felt weird to have Tracy?
There were some very unsatisfactory things this week, and Kerry did say on Twitter that he was really struggling for characters, because more than that, which is total bollocks, of course, was the lack of Jennifer at the naming ceremony. After bloody months of going on about it, she was convinced by all this paranoia and the fact that it was all coming right and that's their baby and all that stuff. And no, she wasn't anywhere, so I moaned about that on Twitter. And Kerry
I do agree with you with the Tracy and Helen thing. That did seem really odd. I mean, because I really like Tracy, and I think she's got her head screwed on. So you'd think she'd know better than to go to Helen for any kind of advice, apart from about cheese. So it did strike me a lot. But also more and more Tracy. So I still love that scene because it was Tracy, and she's fantastic.
Could it be a symptom of Tracy's stock in the village rising?
There's a kind of social, there's a social climbing now. She feels she can talk to Helen.
Yeah, for relationship advice. Helen.
Just on Jennifer briefly, well, as you mentioned that, she didn't turn, well, I mean, nobody turned up to Phoebe's graduation. That didn't seem to happen, did it? But then Jennifer would have been in overdrive at this graduation in Oxford, wouldn't she? But going back to the property thing, which we were talking about, who is paying the rent on Grange Farm? Because Will has no job, Ed has no job,
So at Christmas,
Joe has died, so there's no pension.
Didn't at Christmas Oliver sort of go, oh, never mind?
Oh,
No.
they got given the farm.
So the Christmas episode, he took them to Grey Gables, and they said, we don't have any money, and he said, never mind, and that was it.
Hold on, wait a
They do both have a bit of a job. It might not be full-time. Eddie Senior works at the market, as does Ed Junior. And Eddie is also still doing his patios.
Yeah. I'm telling you, if Ed owned that house, Emma would be with him. He does not own that house.
I have a really quick question, because I'm using the mic. Does anyone know, do squatters' rights still exist? Because way back when I was around 18, they did. Okay, so we can't have the situation where Ed just left the house.
There's a question behind you, and then we'll get on to the awards.
I have another property question.
Yes.
When Justin bought the Dower House,
Yes.
where did the money go?
Because
the house was kept in trust by Lillian from Matt, so Matt shouldn't have got the money because it's a trust. So where is this money?
Maybe that's why Lillian's being a barmaid rather than property developer these days. There is an up-to-date spreadsheet of who owns what property in Ambridge. And even as ACCA fans, there are some corners of the fandom that we think are nerdy. Deborah, and then we go.
How did the residents from the Laurels manage to get up the stairs to the ghost stories in the attic?
It was on a zip wire.
I don't know if any of you saw it, the Mile yesterday, just by the door, they've got their museum accreditation sign, and I've just thought the Archers have been trolling me recently. So I do powerlifting, so they're now all at the gym. But before then, it was a public art commission, which is what I do in my work, but I also work at the Tate, so I work in the museum sector. Elizabeth's saying, yeah, no, of course you can have a part from this ancient thing of which there's only one of in the whole of the world. No problem, easy. It's just like, oh my good God. So she can't be in an accredited museum, so just, like the business. Anyway, you have to get that out.
Right, so we do have notices before prizes, do we? Or prizes?
Notices afterwards. There's housekeeping afterwards about what to do after this.
Yes.
But we'll do the awards first. So,
right. Can a volunteer come and take pictures of the awards? Michael, I can see you running away there. No, here. Yeah, just, let me just, so we need them and switch. Right.
So we were the gift that keeps on giving. This is a very special award for somebody who's really put their service into academic archers, who has tirelessly brought us so much joy. You're in the way, and that's Helen Burrows. So we've given Helen the gift of wool, so you can come back with something else knitted next year. It's quite nice wool as well.
And there's proper sheepy wool. And this is your award.
Next up, this isn't a paper we've heard yet, but it will be sent. We've been waiting since the very beginning of Academic Archers for this paper to arrive with us, and this year it did, and I think it's been delivered by somebody who could become quite an Academic Archers legend, actually, and that's Gary, Ambridge versus Springfield.
Now, you might notice, Gary hasn't actually done anything yet.
No.
So, we reserve the right to take this back if the paper tomorrow is shite.
Gary's prize, as well, his little award prize, is a stopwatch.
Best in show. So surreal. So surreal.
This is a biggie. So, those of you that were here with us in the first year will remember Dr. Samantha Walton's amazingly entitled paper, Cider with Grundy, about orcharding practices in the UK and what the Grundys would or wouldn't be doing. So ever since, we have had an award for Best Title. And the title this year, Sarah Kate Merry with a script of the fan.
Bottle of tumble Cossack.
There's a bottle of cider.
Best in show.
Now, Fiona Starr, we decided to give the award of the lemon drizzle cake to, but she's had to leave earlier, but we will make sure that she does get that. She will get the cake. We won't eat it on the way home, we promise. No, we will. We will pass it on to go. It was a beautiful paper, and she's an absolutely lovely lady. So the last, and we've never had a joint award before, to my knowledge, to my memory, is the Down the Fans Award. Now, these are two papers that we think the titles of, and we saw the content of which really spoke to us as fans and what we're like and really got into our psyche. So the joint award goes to They Need Counselling from Karen Pollock and I Hate the Archers Because from Jez. As these were both papers that were talking about, oh, they all need counselling, oh, I hate the Archers because the prizes are flapjacks to be thrown at. And that really brings our proceedings for the day to a close. Thank you all very much. It's been a lovely day. It's been a beautiful, varied day as ever. It's been great to see many of you here again after so many years with us. I've just got a last bit of housekeeping to do before we send off. But you want to... No, I'm done. You're done. Okay. So this evening, for those of you that have tickets for dinner, our after dinner speaker is Lucy B. Freeman from Dum Tee Dum. She has arrived to Reading. She will be meeting us at the venue. There aren't any spare seats at the dinner, I'm afraid, so if you don't have a ticket, I'm really sorry. We had to close the numbers for this a couple of weeks ago for catering to be able to do their thing. But Lucy will be there. We will meet in the Meadow Suite bar. It's all signposted. So we are there at the top. And then we're going to this one here. And if you remember, that was the posh house picture that we showed. That we showed earlier on in the day. So that's the walk to do. Our volunteers will gather and help you to, if you want to go in groups to walk up the hill to White Knights campus, if you don't know where your bearings, they will help you get up the road. So if I can ask the volunteers to assemble and take some groups of you through. Catherine Hoskin knows the directions to help you with. So it'd be really great if you could help others get up the road in that way. And then when you get onto campus, you'll be here, and you walk all the way around to here. But again, it's all signposted, or just get a cab. They all know where it is. Just say Park House, White Knights campus, and the taxi driver will take you there. That's what it looks like. We're having our dinner in there. Okay, fine. And you can come to those that don't...
So there was some confusion about this, but we're going to finish the dinner at about 9. And we've got the Meadow Suite till 1, so people can come and it'll be a paying bar wherever you've eaten about 9 o'clock. And I think Lucy will be doing a bit of glad handing then, so if you want to meet her but you aren't eating, that's fine.
Yeah, if you don't have a ticket for dinner, you can still join us at 9, so go and freshen up, get your own food, and come and meet us there at the Meadow Suite bar on the White Knights campus, and that's it.
Correct.
Thank you very much.